buenas noches, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. As always, muchas gracias to everyone for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, and the love and care you guys extend my way. From the heart, thank you. Also, do please like, share, and please leave a comment. Well, to get into the topic on here today, I want to touch on something I've been promising for a while, right? Which is on couple camaradas from Clanton 14. And you could say a personal issue that escalated. But I want to hit it from an angle to also reply on what I've been asked, numerous of times. Just because we're in the system, for example, level 3s, 4s, 180 shoes. Well, it was different in the shoe, right? More so when you were in the shoe, you knew everybody. Or you knew of their presence being there somewhere sitting back there, right? But it don't happen like that all the time. When I hit, for example, when I was into atropine shoe, I met Pilis there I had never heard of, right? And of course, it's common sense, You have to earn, or used to have to earn that right to even know who they were, right? And when I hit Corcoran, it was the same thing. When I hit that Pelican Bay, it was 10 times worse, right? Because there was a lot more senores that were sitting back there for many, many years that they just weren't out there like that, right? By choice or whatever the case may be, right? Nevertheless, it happened amongst camaradas as well, right? And it's what's gonna circle around, right? More so favoritism amongst, hey, that's my homie from my neighborhood, right? Street neighborhood and politics. And how you could be doing things inside hand in hand with an individual that in reality, it's different. Like I always say, at least up north where I'm from, it's we're real clear on who was after us and who we were after, right? We didn't have that set trip amongst camaradas like that, right? But when you come down south, we all belong under the same faction per se, but it's game banging, right? There's hatred there. Let's just be honest. But I'll stop beating around the bush, right? I want to take you back to Ironwood. When I had Ironwood, again, there was many camaradas that one time or another they did their thing in a certain spot. They went did their shoe turn. They got into Torica conversations with the Billy, earned the right, the trust to get out and do things for him, right? Take on responsibilities and make money for him and be under his wing, right? Under his name. I remember back then they were more of a myth, right? Than what you see today. Nevertheless, in Ironwood, I had a real good chess partner, or that I used to like to play chess with, right? A camarada from Clanton 14. I mentioned him before in numerous of videos or lives, which was Popeye from Eastside Clanton. He was a older homie, right? And but he was a mellow homie, and I don't mean mellow like he wasn't about his business, because he was. I mean, he really liked to be involved like that, right? He liked to do his thing and at the same time do his thing, right? If you guys get it. At one point, he was a lifer, so he was doing his thing in the shadows. He didn't like that recognition of holding a jardín or a lot of people knowing. He was doing things for Popeye from Harpies, and it happens like that, right? For example, I'm not gonna say worked hand in hand, but I did favors for Pilis or took on responsibilities, and I'm from up north, right? Not necessarily you run across camaradas that are working for their Pili, right, in their area. Sometimes it just plays out like that, right? Which was the case here. Again, we sat down, play, we exchanged words, never them gang stories or game wars or just talked about stuff, right? I always been a nerd, documentaries, and I always like lecha, period, right? If it was in the system, I like to get to know where my people were originally, how it was, where they come from, which is the game banging down south, the barrios, XXX, things like that, or again, world history, anything that had to do with learning. I was always, you could say, a nerd to it, right? Attracted to it. And the homie was the same, right? He liked knowledge. So, anyways, on this yard. He was doing his thing. He wasn't the one going out to hit because he was us most lifers. How it is for us inside, right? Which is, you go in strong, You have camaradas from your neighborhood riding you. You have hyenas that know you personally on the street that at one point or another, they, well, you guys get it. They stay in touch and years go by, right? Everybody fades out. If you're lucky, you'll have a good solid camarada, maybe a homegrown. Stay in touch, but more so, it's always going to be your family, right? Nevertheless, he hustled it. What I mean by that, for example, I'm going to use me, right? Whenever I hit on the yard, I would give him action, right? And I used to do it for him, right? But I had the authority from Terco to do so that he could spin it around for Popeye, right? From Harpies and get something up there to him out of respect. What I mean by that, well, I used to give him a gramo and a cuartito for the price of a gramo, right? So he could make some feria for his canteen and whatever, right? And I was never that stingy individual, right? Maybe that's why I got so lucky when I was doing my thing, because I used to like giving a gramo with five. Well, that's not important, right? I like to give extra as it was. I'll just leave it at that, right? But anyways, whenever we had something to discuss, it was instead of having the extra years listening, we had enough clecha to just say, let's sit down, let's boogie, let's break our brain, and so we sit down, we play chess, dominoes, whatever, and we discuss whatever was on the table. But anyways, I would later touch on the homie, right? Again, he was alive, was down for many years. He was already in Pelican Bay, and it's how again he got in touch with Popeye, right? Well, within time, there was a camarada around my age, right? And he was from Ghetto Boys, trippy, and this fool was a shoe kick out, fresh out the shoe, and he was just different, right? When you get that, you could say blessings from a Pili, at least back in these days. There was two different time avatos, right? Those that you got out, took care of responsibilities, didn't glow on the fact that you were in touch with the Pili, right? Or those that got out and wanted everybody on the yard to know they were in touch with the Pili, if you get what I'm trying to say. They wanted to gang things by word of mouth instead of by actually earning them, right? Which it happens, and again, it's just difference, right? From characters, you could say. Well, anyways, Trippy was this individual, right? He had homies from his area and a couple homies from his neighborhood on the yard, and he liked the attention. He liked to be the one, you could say, in the little ranfla they had going, the one in the middle with all the attention of being the vato con el jugo, right? But everyone always forgets that squad sits up there in the tower, and they're also looking, right? Or that there is individuals on the yard telling, and at this time was they were trying to slam everybody, right? Squad for anything. Anyways, about a month went by, and Popo's homeboy drove up, right? His homeboy Scrappy, again, freshly out of the shoe, Oh no, yes, he was up in Pelican Bay. He started doing things for Popeye from Harpies as well. He got shot out to a different pinta first. And if you were really with it, you're gonna always carry the pills with you from the shoe out. Just responsibilities that had to be taken out, right? Responsibilities that had to be followed to the dot. You see, well, I'll get to that at the end. Anyways, he ended up doing something. He ended up going to the hole, and from the hole is where he cut the transfer down there to Ironwood, right? So it's how he was getting there. Now, for the minute he got on the yard, we sat down to play some chess, Popeye and myself, and Homewood was there, and basically it went from a relaxing conversation and a cool game to basically, he wanted permission to hit Trippy, and it's a no-no for many reasons, right? But I'll be honest, when something got out of hand, to me personally, it was better. You guys pick up your pedazo, lace your shoes up, go in the cell and go ahead and boogie, right? And I used to prefer it that way, right? Desquítense, let it out. If you're strongly about it, go ahead and hit each other. If it's something you just need off your chest, go ahead, go in the cell, lump each other up and let it go, right? But you can't do that when you have camaradas that are answering to somebody. In this case, all three of them were answering to Popeye, you know. And why? Well, if you're smart, it's not permitted, first and foremost, right? Even amongst Raza. Us fighting each other, it's against. If it's that serious, make it personal. Go get your piece. Either come out to the yard or go in a cell till one of the only one walks out, right? That's how it was established, at least. And if you allow it, there's one of them gonna bound to be angry, right? When they go back there and or they answer their pili, and your name's gonna come out in a negative light, right? Well, we got permission from so and so, working for so and so. Next thing you know, the pili you're holding it down for hears. You're gonna get your ear smacked back. Sometimes you're gonna get lumped up. Other times you're gonna get a couple holes poked into and you know, cure yourself in the cell till you're well and you're able to program or whatever, right? Regardless, it ricochets, right? It's a no-no. So my first response was no. It's not permitted, homeboy. You know, disculpen. I know sometimes there's issues on the yard that could be resolved just by, unas guajoloteras and let it go, right? And I directed my conversation to Papa and I told him, look, I know he's your homeboy, you're sitting here supporting him, but there ain't none of that, that favoritism just because you're the same neighborhood, same side, whatever. I can't do nothing, homeboy. To understand, I would be putting you on the spot too. And he understood, right? Nevertheless, my responsibility was to get the other end of the things, right? Which was how Trippy felt. So, I went out to yard and I told the camarada, hey, me das un minuto, right? And of course, well, word of mouth gets around, they know who has the jardín, right? So it was like, let's take a roll, right? Let's take a stroll. So we went, took a walk, and started telling him, look, I understand you and homeboy from Clanton have a personal issue. And homeboy straight up told me, it's more than a personal issue. I'm gonna get him. And I asked him, what you mean you're gonna get him? And he goes, I gotta get him. It was his carnal, right? From Ghetto Boy, excuse me. On the streets, they got killed by homeboy, right? By Scrappy from Clanton. In game banging, right? But he just couldn't let go of it. Now, my response wasn't an angry mode, right? Which was, why you bring these issues to the yard? And his response was, what you mean? And I go, well, you and him are working for Popeye. Why couldn't this be brought up to Popeye to be cleared by him so you guys could handle your business? And neither one of them was aware they were working for the same Pili. It's just, again, it's one of them things that we tend to always know each other, but there is Pilis that they prefer it like that, right? Because, for example, they have a worker, his crew here, something happens negative with one of them. Over in this yard, they're in contact with each other, find out, and eventually it starts becoming a problem, right? And so Pilis sometimes they're just not gonna tell you, right? Of course, it's a small world, so if you're constantly going in and out the shoe, you'll find out, right? Who's who, who's under who, and or more so, right? Again, they were surprised, and again, I told them the guidelines, right? We can't fight camaradas. Now, the option we could do here is make it a personal issue, right? But with all the respect, I respect Papa, you guys being under him, but you're in Terco's jardín. So we're gonna make a personal issue with Terco. And until that permission comes back, then you about to have to stay away from each other. So it was agreed, right? So something like this, I knew was a time bomb, right? It's gonna come out, For example, I don't know how I would react if the killer of my brother was on the yard with me, right? Even if somebody was telling me, oh, he's supposed to be your primo because you have the same deal. Or working for the same Pili, he's a camarada, that don't matter, right? You took my loved one and game banging on the streets, but it's possible inside. Again, personal, right? But you're gonna try to kill each other. You're not gonna go soft once it reaches them ears, right? Anyways, I reached out to Terco, and his response was, let him do it. Let him do it, but once they get back there, they're both gonna answer up for it. We want to see paperwork. Because that was the first thing that I got asked. Have I seen the paperwork where homeboy took up homeboy's family member? And I told him, nah. Happened on the streets, and guess homeboy never got caught. But, it's one of them things that happen amongst barrios that everybody knows, right? Just people kept their mouth shut. So anyways, You told me basically to allow it, to allow the problem to rotate to to the hole, and let them answer for it back there, right? Continue to hold the jardín and make feria for them. At the end of the day, that's what it is, right? So, anyways, talk to them. They just had to let me know when they were gonna do it, so they could go ahead and buck up. And if anybody had something coming in or moving, they could put it on pause for. It's amongst Ranfla, right? It's amongst Sureños, so we'll be locked down a day or two at this time, right? Because there's nothing out of race, at least. So it was established they were going to do it on the yard, the day and everything. And they did, right? They did unlock. When they said they would do it, they went to the corner of the yard. They said they would do it, and they buck up. I know the homie from Ghetto Boys. He had his homeboys on the yard, right? And Popeye was there, amongst other camaradas, right, from Clanton. But they had a set trip amongst their own water, right, which is north side, wet, and it was personal though. Scrappy got the best of him though, However, they started going at it. However it happens, homeboy landed wrong, hit the floor. Homeboy jumped on him and just got the best of him. And went out there to the hole, and then it became something. Popoy and also from Mohammed, they dealt with, right? And Popeye is a cool individual, but you don't want to mess with his money. Or you didn't want to mess with his feria, right? And they were both messing with his feria. Instead of hitting the yard, programming, making money for him, they were handling street business on the prison yard, which is a no-no. We don't have the right to do that either. And he had them both whacked. He didn't want to know nothing about him being in anybody's program, period. He wanted them gone. I got word because if they, by any chance they came back out to yard, they were to be whacked, taken out, no compassion. He'd rather lose two soldados that to him they were useless to keep putting up with people that don't concentrate on what in their eyes is what we have to do. Anyways, when I got the news on out there and we got the news, they were both blasted in the hole. I informed Popeye, and homeboy went on his feelings. He went on his feelings, and he basically tried to punch out, from doing things for Popeye. But I was nobody. If I consider myself a smart individual, Popeye knew which workers were on that yard of his, the barrios, and he knew the angles that were gonna come with his decisions, right? That's why they're there. And warnings hit the yard. Again, this was a camarada from Clanton that I had a lot of respect, From side busting, you could say, conversations, I learned quite a bit from the older vato, right? But things played out with him. But I would have to do a second part on this because you guys know I don't like to hold you guys too long for an episode. I've been promising somebody to touch on the camaradas from Clanton. And this is how it started with Popeye from Clanton, with Popeye from Harpies, right? That led up to, well, I'm sure Bosco knows what I'm talking about. But with this said, I'll say this. There are many, many things said when we're youngsters on the streets and people come out prison. I was there. I analyzed, however you say it, right? Them cats, right? Because we grow up all knowing that's where we have to go earn our stripes. We have to follow the program, rules and regulations. But it's all a myth. We're being misled. You see, this is a perfect case where the person that takes out brother cannot even defend that pride because their money, their program is bad. It's worth more than whatever you're going through. You see the respect there? I understand it's game banging, but remember that game banging stops the minute you hit county jail. None of that is permitted, point blank. It has nothing to do with races. We can't do it amongst each other. Strike one was they didn't get out the shoe to keep pushing Popoy's agenda. They concentrated on personal issues. It's not allowed. Strike two on this homie was bringing street issues into a prison, making it personal, and both of them walking away from it. There's pilis that would allow it to go on. There's pilis like Popeye that didn't allow it. Again, what are you going to earn when the person, his only agenda is to have as many workers working for him, making feria, but none of his workers mean anything. Remember, you're replaceable by 1,000 that are already there. It's either a straight line, derecha la flecha, as they say, or that side everybody talks, or that nobody wants to be in, right? So again, just be wise, Stay true to yourself, loyal to your loved ones. I will continue with this. Thank you. Buenas noches.